Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG. So today I'm going to be upgrading the Wilds of Eldraine commander deck, Fey Dominion. So as you can see from this deck, this really focuses on that fairy tribe. If you are looking to buy this link on Amazon, I will post the link down below so that you can help support the channel. So with that said, this does have a face fronting commander as well as a backup commander. So first up, we do have Tegwyl, Duke of Splendor. So for 3 mana, it has flying and death touch. It is a fairy noble, so it does have that noble type on it. Also, other fairies you control get +1/+1, so a great anthem for your fairies, especially if you're overwhelming the board with fairies. Also on top of that, if they do die, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. This deck also does have a secondary commander in the box with Alayla, Cunning Conqueror. So for 4 mana, it's a fairy warlock. It does have flying. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, create a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with flying. It also does read, whenever one or more fairies you control deal combat damage to a player, go target creature that player controls. So this is a very interesting commander. It's going to be making more and more fairies on the battlefield as long as you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn. Plus it does have that goad mechanic built into it so that your opponents are fighting each other while you kind of slip away for the win here and there. It's kind of funny, normally with my upgrade videos on commander decks, I will usually pick one commander to focus on. However, with this pre-constructed deck, you could use either one of the commanders to be your face commander. Because the way I upgraded the deck, it doesn't matter which one you want to pick. However, I do like Tegwyl a little bit better because it's an anthem for your fairies, and on top of that, if they do die, you draw a card and lose 1 life, so that's honestly pretty great value overall. However, you could pick one or the other when upgrading this deck. So when upgrading a deck, I first like to look at some of the new cards that are put into it. Are they going to be good additions into the deck, or do we want to take them out? Here are some of the ones that I found worked extremely well. Archmage of Echoes is pretty excellent for 4 mana. Whenever you cast a fairy or a wizard permanent spell, copy it. Also on top of that, it is a flying ward too, and it's a 4/4, so it's a good body to block in the air or swing in for some damage. This is a pretty good spell overall. In a way, it's kind of like Reflections of Lajara, so I would say this is definitely a great include in the deck. They also did make a couple of fairy rogues like Blightwing Bandit, Nettling Nuisance, and Fairy Bladecrafter. So with Blightwing Bandit, it has flying and death touch. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, look at the top card of that player's library, then exile it face down. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. So yeah, each time that you're going to be casting a spell for the first time on each opponent's turn, you're going to be exiling 3 cards that you could use later on and spend mana of any kind on it. Also with Nettling Nuisance, it does have flying. Whenever one or more fairies you control deal combat damage to a player, that player creates a 4/2 red pirate creature token with this creature can't block. The token is goaded for the rest of the game. So this is pretty nice because you're going to have a lot of pirates on the board as long as this deals combat damage, or one of another fairies you control deal combat damage. You're going to be making a bunch of pirates that are big on the battlefield that could be swinging in for damage, and they're never going to be attacking you because it's going to be goaded for the rest of the game. I do also like Fairy Bladecrafter, mainly because it does have the ability whenever one or more fairies you control deal combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on Fairy Blademaster. Also, when it does die, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life where X is its power. So this one is pretty good overall. The more combat damage you do deal with fairies, the bigger this creature will get. And on top of that, when it does die, you're going to be gaining life and your opponent's going to be losing life based off of its power. This is going to be a pretty good effect overall in the deck just for 3 mana being a 2/2 flying creature. Another card that caught my eye while looking through the deck was Malleable Imposter. This is a pretty good card overall, especially being a clone effect. It is a fairy shapeshifter, flash and flying. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature an opponent controls, except it's a fairy shapeshifter in addition to its other types, and it also does have flying. So say for example, somebody has a Blightsteel Colossus on the battlefield and they think they're going to be winning the game, and then they swing against an opponent, then that opponent loses. You could flash this in on their turn, and when it happens to be your turn next, you could swing against them so that they lose to a Blightsteel Colossus. That's just a fun example I'm thinking about with this card. Another card I did want to bring your attention to is Tegwyl's Scouring. So for 6 mana, you may cast it as though it had flash by tapping 3 untapped creatures you control with flying in addition to paying its other cost. You can destroy all creatures, create 3 1/1 black fairy rogue creature tokens with flying. So everybody knows that board wipes are very good in Commander. However, if you cast it at instant speed, that's even better because you can catch people off guard. Say for example they played a bunch of spells or even a Crater Hoof to win the game. You can cast this at flash speed to destroy everything on the battlefield. This is going to provide such great value in surprise effects. Another way we could disrupt our opponent's game plan from attacking either us or another opponent is having Misleading Signpost. So I will say this is a very fun card to look at. It does cost 3 mana and it does have a flash ability so you can cast it at any time. It does read when it enters the battlefield during the declared attacker step. You may reselect which player or permanent target attacking creature is attacking. So again, let's go back to that example of somebody having a Blightsteel Colossus, but instead of them going for another player, they're going after you. But if you do cast this at instant speed, you could essentially redirect that Blightsteel Colossus to attack another permanent or player. This is going to be a pretty fun commander card to play in the future. So these are some of the new cards that are pretty exciting for me. There's also some great reprints that get me excited as well. Some of them are pretty popular in other formats. However, they're pretty good overall in Commander, like Brazen Borrower. On its adventure side, you could bounce a non-land permanent and opponent controls, and on top of that, it can have flash and flying and can block only creatures with flying. That's a little bit of a downside, but however, with everything else, this is all upside. You could cast a spell and then later on cast the creature spell. This is an all-star in many formats and really was a big popular deck in Standard when I did play it. Another reprint I did want to glance over is Glen Endra Archmage. For 4 mana, it does have flying, but most importantly, it has that blue ability, sacrifice it, counter target non-creature spell, and it does have the persist ability, so when you do sacrifice it, it will enter the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter so that you could reuse it later on to counter something else. So that's a pretty good pick. Another great pick is Kindred Dominus that was reprinted in Commander Masters. It is reprinted in this set as well, so this is a perfect card in the deck because it's a one-sided board wipe. Because we are in that fairy tribal theme, we could choose a target creature type, which is obviously going to be fairies, destroy all other creatures that aren't of the chosen type. So this is a one-sided board wipe. You could have all your fairies stay on the battlefield while everybody else's creatures are going to be destroyed. So this is excellent in the deck. Another fun card I do want to mention is Rankle, Master of Pranks. This is a pretty fun one. I do like it, mainly because it has a lot of fun things going on for it, especially being a fairy rogue. It does have flying and haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose any number. Each player discards a card, each player loses 1 life and draws a card, and each player sacrifices a creature. This actually goes very well with the first commander option because you want your fairies dying, and if you do have a lot of fairies on the battlefield, you can essentially have each player sacrifice a creature. You'll just sacrifice a fairy because it's not a big deal, and then with that you will be able to get some card draw out of it. So this is an absolute menace in the deck. However, I don't know why they reprinted Hullbreaker Horror in this deck because it has nothing to do with fairies, but it's a welcome reprint. It does have flash and this spell can't be countered. When you cast the spell, choose up to 1, return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, and return a target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So this is an absolute nightmare to deal with. I don't know if you've ever played against this before, but it's in this deck and you're building this deck, so it's not a big deal at all because you're going to be taking so much advantage of different spells being cast so that you could bounce permanents or return permanents to their owner's hands. So this is going to be a great addition into the deck nonetheless, even though it doesn't necessarily fit with the theme of fairies. So those are cards in the deck, some of them that are reprinted and some that are new. I do also want to talk about cards that I would add personally in the deck to make it a little bit more upgraded. The first one I had to include is obviously Bitter Blossom. So for 2 mana, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with flying. So this is a classic all-star in Commander, putting fairies on the battlefield, all that expense for 1 life. This is pretty huge, especially in this deck when we want to have a lot of fairies in the battlefield. Plus it did get a fun new art treatment in the Enchanting Tales, so this is a great reprint in the Enchanting Tales slot. Another one I did want to mention is Kindred Discovery. You can enter the battlefield and choose a creature type. Obviously you're going to be choosing fairies, so for 5 mana, whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, you draw a card. Also do know it's not a May ability. You have to draw a card no matter what whenever a fairy attacks or enters the battlefield. So just be warned, you might deck yourself with this, but it does have some new stunning art with fairies in it, so this is an auto-include in the deck for sure. Also, it's been reprinted in the new Enchanting Tales. However, another way we could draw some cards with our fairies is using Biden of Thassa. So for 4 mana, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Also, you can pay 2 mana and tap it. Creatures your opponents control attack this turn, so it's kind of like a goat ability, but but they could also attack you. However, we like it mainly for that first ability. Whenever a fairy we control will deal combat damage, we'll draw some cards, and on top of that, if we do have a lot of fairies on the battlefield, the more card advantage we will get. I did also want to add another card in the deck, kind of like Kindred Dominance, like Raise the Palisade. For 5 mana, choose a creature type, return all creatures that aren't of the chosen type to their owner's hand. So very similar to Kindred Dominance, but instead of destroying creatures, you're just going to be returning creatures to their hand besides our fairies, so this is going to be a benefit in the deck, no question about it. Also, the first commander is an anthem for our creatures. However, we do want to have some more like Vanquisher's Banner so that we could buff up our creatures. So for 5 mana, you could choose a creature type. Obviously, you're going to be choosing fairies. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, you draw a card. So this provides a great anthem, and on top of that card draw for our deck, Vanquisher's Banner is a great card in most tribal decks, but it's specifically great in this one as well. But if you really want to buff up your creatures, Coat of Arms and Door of Destinies is going to get the job done. Coat of Arms reads for 5 mana, each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. So not only is this an anthem, it's a mega anthem. This is going to be pretty critical in the deck for sure. Also with Door of Destinies, you can choose fairies as the chosen creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, put a charge counter on Door of Destinies. Also, creatures you control with the chosen type get +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. Say, for example, you casted about 6 fairy spells with Door of Destinies on the battlefield. All the fairies you control on the battlefield will get +6/+6, so this is going to be absolutely huge in the deck. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video about Fey Dominion, the Precon product for the new Wilds of Eldraine. I did make a deck list of some of the upgrades and also some of the things you may want to consider taking out. The ones that are taken out are going to be on the sideboard in the deck list down below on Moxfield. So if you do want to go check that out, the link will be down below. But what do you think of this Precon product? Do you like it? Do you feel like you're going to be buying it for yourself? Or do you feel like you're just going to be making some of the commanders out of scratch? I do feel like this is a fun product overall, especially for Fairy Tribal. So overall, I do like this product. I do like this a little bit more than some of the other ones previously. I'm not a big fan of Dimir colors though. However, I do feel like this is a little step in the different direction with having some Fairy Tribal themes in there, as well as going with a little bit of a goat theme with a Layla. So with all that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.